And welcome back to the Big 12 Fall Football Reports. We continue our process with the Arizona Wildcats and our good friend Jason Scheer, the publisher of Wildcat Authority, right here on the 24/7 Sports Network. Jason, appreciate you taking some time to give us a little insight on those other Wildcats, the newcomers. I even wore my red and blue for you. This is red and blue Arizona colors. This is not red and blue Kansas colors.
You gotta make sure you clarify that every time.
Every time. It's also red, blue, and I think there's some white. Yeah, there's some white on the inside. It's America. So get off my back, people. Let's start with the simple question of give me an overview of where this team is at this point of fall camp.
They're a little bit away from prepping for New Mexico, and right now I think that there's some depth chart battles going on. They're trying to find the right combinations at a lot of different positions. They're installing kind of a brand new offense or a relatively new offense, so that's been a lot of the work. And the defense returns a lot from last season, and in terms of play calling and things like that. So they've been ahead of the offense, but probably just like any camp, there's some good days and some bad days.
Yep. Okay, give me some insight on what this new offense is about.
It's very multiple. I'm surprised. Dita Babers is the offensive coordinator at Arizona, came from Syracuse, and it is a very multiple offense with a variety of looks. We've seen fullbacks, we've seen two tight end sets, a lot of motion. But at the end of the day, it's just like any other offense. You want to put the ball in the hands of your playmakers, let Noah Fafita, let Tatori McMillan and the running backs kind of go to work and make sure that they get the ball as much as possible.
Now, you might have just answered my next question, but give me the key strengths of this offense.
Noah Fafita and T-Mac are going to be one of the best combinations in the nation. They both look better than they did last season. Noah Fafita's arm strength has clearly improved. And I think Arizona has an underrated running back room. Got a transfer from New Mexico by the name of Ja'Cory Krosky-Barrett. He was actually committed to Arizona, committed to Ole Miss, and then wound up back at Arizona. But he is very, very good. Quali Conley from San Jose State is really good. They added Kijik Riscano, a 4-star that was from Ole Miss. He's been good in spring. So they're wide receivers, their running backs, their quarterbacks. Offensively, they are very, very good.
That's good news for Arizona. But what is the key weakness of this offense?
The O-line's been banged up, and they got to make sure that changes for the season. They right now are without a guard who has an injury that will probably last them a little bit. It would have been a starter. The center's being held out. It's one of those situations where I think if the first game was this weekend, they would probably play, but the offensive line depth is not very good. And so if they lose one of those, I would call them a big 3 starters, Jonas Habanea, Wendell Moy, and Rhino at right tackle. If they lost one of those 3 guys, there would be a major, major drop off. And to be honest, I'm not sure kind of how they would fill those gaps.
Interesting. Let's flip it over to the defense. What's the strength of this Arizona defense?
The secondary is really good. The Tacario Davis is one of the best corners in the country. They returned the safeties from last season's defense: Gunnar Maldonado, Dalton Johnson, Genesis Smith. I'd put that up with anyone in terms of the secondary. They were able to get some pretty quality additions at the other corner spot, which was a concern going into camp. But that secondary mixed that with Jacob Manu at linebacker, who's really, really good. And they have some very clear strengths on the defensive side of the ball.
Okay. Now the weakness. What's the biggest concern on that defensive side of the ball?
Probably similar to the offensive line, the defensive line depth. I really like the 4 guys that they start. I think they're quality. Behind that, there's kind of a drop off, mostly at defensive end. Who's going to be that defensive end that could kind of spell the other guys? Their starters are good, but you're going to need some depth, and are they able to play guys without there being a major drop off? Overall, there's depth in the secondary. There's decent depth at linebacker, but the defensive line is, they want to rotate quite a bit. Will they be able to do that without there being a drop off between the starters and the other guys?
Okay, that's interesting stuff. But what defines a successful season for the Arizona Wildcats, and what needs to go right for that to happen?
It's funny because Arizona football just a few years ago was not good, and success would be make a bowl game. And if Arizona made a bowl game, it was an awesome season. Now that they had the season that they had last year with the Alamo Bowl, and as well as they played, and they returned quite a bit, they've got to have a good year. I mean, they've got to be in contention for the Big 12 title. And it's something where, people will not be happy with a 7-win season. I mean, they really have to make a run at this thing. In order for that to happen, I think they have to be healthy. We talked to the linebacker coach the other day, and he said the key isn't how this guy plays or that guy plays. It's health. When you have a Noah Fafita, a T-Mac, a Jacob Manu, if one of those guys goes down, it changes everything. And so that's why they're kind of taking care of them during camp to make sure that they have them healthy for the season opener. The depth would be the other thing. Like maybe the guys have to step up, but to me, it's they have to stay healthy. And that kind of falls in line with the depth. If one of those star players goes down, it's going to be really hard for them to maintain the quality that they have with them.
Well, our next question was what likely goes wrong in the season if they fall short of expectations. But in this conference that is so quarterback heavy, there's so many great quarterbacks. Almost every school can answer if the quarterback gets hurt. Yeah. And that's true at Arizona, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if Noah Fafita gets hurt, I don't want to say season over, but man, they got to figure out something. And my guess is they'd go from a balanced offense to a very run heavy offense because the backup quarterback still isn't decided. I'm not sure it'll be decided before the first game. And that's kind of gone back and forth depending on the day. But even with that being said, none of them are close to Noah. And so, if Noah goes down, it becomes a major issue. And as good as T-Mac is and some of the weapons they have on offense, it just changes the dynamic completely if Noah gets hurt.
Man, Jason, when you get a really good young quarterback, it makes you really optimistic for the team, but it also makes it almost impossible to recruit other quarterbacks. They want to come in and play. That's going on at other schools too. Okay. Every schedule seems to have that linchpin game, the one that turns you in the right or wrong direction. Can you point to a game on Arizona's schedule that could lead to greater success or initiate maybe a falling short of expectations?
Yeah, we're going to know about Arizona early in the season. They have 2 games they should win against New Mexico and NAU. And then even though it's a non-conference game, they go on the road to Kansas State. They have a bye week, and then they go on the road to Utah. So that 2-game stretch, we're going to know everything. I mean, if they split, it's great. If they sweep, and if they go 0-2, like we're going to know more about this football team pretty early in the season with those 2 games because they're going to be underdogs. They're going on the road. And so we're going to find out what Arizona is made of, within the first 4 games of the season.
I'm assuming that Arizona's success last year has kind of warmed up that series in terms of what the fans see between Arizona and Utah.
Yeah. It's I'm sure Utah doesn't think of it as a rivalry, but Arizona fans get up for that game. I mean, there's a history there. There's some plays in the series that kind of stick out. And, when Jedd Fisch was here, he made no secret about it. We're trying to be like the Utah program. And so when Arizona blew out Utah last season, it was a big deal. And I'm sure Utah remembers that greatly. And Arizona's got to travel there. But that's a fun game. And I think Arizona fans have a lot of respect for Utah because they've been around that program. They know what Whittingham has done. But that's always been like a benchmarker of where's the Arizona program is how well they do against a team like Utah.
Well, Fisch bolted. Now Brent Brennan is the coach. How's that transition worked? And you mentioned the offense, but are there any other changes about this program that fans will notice?
Brennan and Fisch are very different. Fisch was very hands-on with the offense and the quarterbacks. He was the offensive coordinator. He was basically the quarterback's coach. Brent Brennan is more of a CEO type. He has input, but at the same time, he lets his assistants coach. He makes his way through practice and kind of watches everything. He is involved with the wide receivers because he used to play wide receiver. the vibe is different. He's a lot less concerned with the outside perspective of the team, and I think that's been a little weird for the media. Is like, their practices are open, but they're not advertising it. They're not having an end of fall camp event or anything like that, and so it's a little different in that regard. In terms of how it'll look on the field, it's going to be different. I mean, the offense is going to look different, and the defense, even though they returned Dwayne Akina, it's going to be more aggressive. Last year was more of a kind of hold your ground and that kind of defense, and this year it's going to be more aggressive, a lot more blitzing from what we've seen, and they're just kind of find their identity a little bit still, but their identity is, at least in terms of play and scheme and all that, it's going to be different than Jedd Fisch.
I'm going to ask you to read minds here real quick. What do you think the general feeling is of the Arizona fan base as they move into this new world of the Big 12?
There's excitement. I think there was skepticism when it first all happened, but at this point, it's exciting, and I think a big reason why is Arizona's playing teams that it hasn't played before. Mm-hmm. Arizona's going against traveling to places and hosting teams that there's not a lot of history, and it's like, okay, well, it's kind of cool. Like, we got to learn about new teams, and at first you had people that were like, oh, I'm loyal to the Pac-12. This is what I grew up on, and mm-hmm. I completely got it, but you hear much less of that now. Now it's more of excitement. The season's starting. The Big 12 logos on the field now, and it's kind of like, okay, let's get started and let's see what this is all about.
One of those teams that Arizona hasn't played in a while, I don't believe, does have some tradition. It just goes way back with Texas Tech. They used to have kind of a rivalry, I guess, back in the day, but the day was a long time ago. How are fans reacting to maybe having that Texas Tech connection rekindled?
Yeah, I remember when Texas Tech came to Tucson, and I believe they won. It's a fun game. There is some history there. Like, Texas Tech and BYU are probably the Big 12 teams that Arizona actually has some history with. And with Texas Tech, it's going to be fun. They get to host them in Arizona Stadium, and I'm trying to think. I believe that's the first home Big 12 game, so that'll also be interesting.
Interesting. So, give me your record prediction for the Arizona Wildcats this season, and why it'll be that.
I'm leaning right now towards 9-3. Okay. I think it's good for Arizona. Misses Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Iowa State. So they got lucky there. That's a nice schedule. And then the home games are all winnable. I worry about the game at Kansas State, at Utah, and then going to Central Florida across the country. It's their space night where they just blow out teams, apparently. Yep. And so those three games stick out to me as the toughest on the schedule. So I think they win all their home games, and they probably lose those three.
Okay. That's Jason Scheer from Wildcat Authority here on the 24/7 Sports Network with his fall camp report on the Wildcats. Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.